Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Fire and Ice podcast. My name is Chris Crawford. Today is Wednesday, September 27th. I'm joined by my good friend / co-host / fellow Notre Dame sufferer, Sara Sanchez. We will not be talking about that game, Sara. We will absolutely 10 people. 10
Who plays?
people.
10 guys. I can't. And they're like, we
Oh.
didn't know. I'm like,
Oh.
I can't. Sorry. I know
Yeah,
you said we
honestly,
were
I
going to
thought
talk about
about
it, but I'm
not
still angry.
I thought about not wearing green for this show just because it seems like that uniform color is not as lucky as they may like to think, but we will not be talking about that too much today. We'll be talking about baseball, offering some top stacks, some starting pitchers to use, and some other cheap option using the Contrarian Edge Optimizer. Before we get into that, let's talk about the weather. There is a game that is likely to be rained out today. It looks like Arizona against Chicago will be banged. Or at the very least, going to be delayed for a while. Probably not looking at a whole heck of a lot of guys to play in that one anyway. But Sara, I know you wanted to talk about something that was also related to the weather, and I'll just give you your time right now.
Well, if you're looking at playoff stuff, I mean, you were keeping an eye on that Arizona game because the Diamondbacks and Marlins and Cubs and Reds are right in that hunt all together. But the game that I thought got absolutely hosed by the weather yesterday was that Mets-Marlins game where it stopped raining in New York, but the field was such a mess they couldn't play the game because the Mets didn't cover the field early enough while they were out of town. And that absolutely hoses the Marlins because they've got a limited number of guys who can pitch for them at the moment. Alcantara's on the injured list. You've got Yuri Perez on the injured list. So they were hoping that they could get 2 starts out of Braxton Gerrit between now and the end of this regular season. And now they're only going to get 1. They've got to figure out how to piece that together. I think that could have huge implications for the wild card race.
Oh, it's going to be huge. I mean, that is a team that it's fighting for its playoff life, and you just made things so much more difficult for things because, look, they're going to play that full 162 at this point. That has to happen. Like, they're not going to go win percentage, especially now that these tiebreakers there's no game 163. Everything has to be played, and this is massive. And look, the Marlins are a fun story, but they did not get here because of their depth. They got here because of their star stuff. They got here, that is a huge, huge loss. And I think you hit the nail on the head. The fact that this happens now, and, I'm not usually a huge conspiracy theorist, but I wonder if the Mets maybe don't want the Miami Marlins to be playing postseason baseball.
I think they were just Metsing. Like, I think this is just a thing that the Mets do.
Fair.
But I'm sure it was more incompetence than malice. But also, like, if you're the Marlins or if you're a Marlins fan, that I truly believe the Marlins fan base might be as upset as the Cubs fan base is this morning. And Cubs Twitter is apoplectic. So,
well, let's talk about that, Sara, because, there's a few injury updates that you have to pay attention to. But knowing that you are one of the most bright Chicago sports fans there is, I want you to talk about that game because that was it was a great baseball game to watch as a neutral fan, but a frustrating one. And really, I know that you and I have probably agree on this one. There's going to be a lot of people blaming Seiya Suzuki for what happened. And for those who missed it, Seiya Suzuki does drop a fly ball that allows 2 runs to score in the 9th inning. Or it may have been the 8th inning. But
it was the 9th. It was the top of the 9th.
Okay, it was the 9th inning. Just tell everyone how silly it is to blame Seiya Suzuki for this.
Oh, it's absolutely ridiculous. Those 2 runners are on base because Drew Smyly walked them. So, like, honestly, Drew Smyly shouldn't walk guys. But this season for the Chicago Cubs is probably going to come down to 1 or 2 games. And it could have come down to 1 or 2 games at any point in the season. It could have been a game in April where Michael Fulmer just couldn't get outs for whatever reason. It could have been the game where Ian Happ had a ball like hit the hand of his glove and bounce out, right? Like, there's all of these games are games where there was one miscue. I believe every single guy on the Chicago Cubs at some point in time has been the dude that is the reason they lost 1 game. Sure. And so to put that on Seiya Suzuki right now, who, by the way, has just been absolutely incredible in the month of September. Like, we've been calling it September over here, but he has pulled a mediocre season up to a well above average season. Just this month alone, he has 104 plate appearances in September. He's slashing 376, 433, 731 with a WRC plus of 205 during that time period. He has 7 home runs there. He hit a triple last night. I mean, Seiya has been incredible. And I just don't want people to remember one play as opposed to the body of work that he has done that has been great.
Yeah, no question about it. It is just one of those things where we remember the last thing. We tend to just be kind of jerks about this type of stuff, if I'm being completely honest with you. And I'm asking you to very politely not to be a jerk about these type of things. Seiya Suzuki is a really good player. Certainly was a poor play. He misread the ball entirely, and it cost him. But
well, and along those lines, I mean, the more mystifying decision for me in that game is David Ross went with Pete Crow Armstrong as a pinch runner and a defensive upgrade in the top of the bottom of the fourth, which was just, or top of the fourth, which was just like way too early for that move. I know they were up 4-0, but like the Braves have such a good offense. It's way too early for that move. And then he has to swap PCA out in the 8th inning because the Braves have chipped away and they're trying to get runs back. So he pinch hits with Patrick Wisdom. If Pete Crow Armstrong is in the outfield instead of Cody Bellinger on that play, PCA probably just runs down that ball and calls Seiya off entirely, right? So like there's a cascading number of things that happen in any baseball game. No one moment in a baseball game comes down to one player, regardless of the play that got made. But it's going to be an insufferable 20-ish hours on Cubs Twitter, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, that's just one that you'd like to just play like right away, right? Like just get this one out of the way. And but they've got to wait a little while. Still some massive baseball games left to be played. And if you are looking at these massive games and you would like to play some daily fantasy sports, make sure you're checking out that Contrarian Edge Optimizer. If you're watching us on YouTube, it's that screen in that little that little coupon code is what I've always called it, in the bottom left right below Sarah's face. Use that, get the optimizer for $1.99 for 7 days. You can also find it at fantasysportslogic.com. You can also find it at sportstopia.io, and make sure you're checking that out as well. We've got new content every single day. If you're a fan of the NFL, if you're a fan of MLB, soon we're going to have NBA stuff. We're really excited for it, and we really appreciate your support. All right, let's take a look at some lineups that we're looking to stack, Sarah. It's an interesting day. I think there's some lineups that we can take advantage of. Who are you looking to stack today?
So I think that my first go-to for stacks here is, it's not going to be surprising. This is not a contrarian pick. It is a pick of the optimizer, however, and that is the Dodgers in Colorado.
Yeah.
This is one of those games you gravitate towards, right? But I think what you do is you combo this with something that's a little bit less expected to piece together a lineup that works really well for you. You can't miss with the Dodgers in Colorado right now. Freddie Freeman having an outstanding season. I think he's going to do some damage in this park, but the guy that I really like in this stack is JD Martinez. JD Martinez is slashing 333, 367, 733 over the last 2 weeks. And Coors Field is built for a guy like JD Martinez, who hits the ball to all fields, has a ton of power. You got Mookie Betts, of course, who is chasing down a possible MVP season. In the last 2 weeks, he's slashing 286, 388, 357. And then take your pick here. I actually like the Jason Hayward play here as long as he's in the lineup. He doesn't play every day, though, so you got to double check your lineup and make sure that Jay Hay's in the lineup if you're going to play him. He's slashing 324, 343, 559 over the last 2 weeks. But if he's not there, another cheap outfield option who can take his place is James Outman, and he has been playing every day. So I really love the idea of stacking Dodgers at Coors.
It would be fun to be like, however, with this type of thing, but no, it's obvious point is obvious or whatnot, but I just think you have to, like, the Colorado effect, the fact that Chris Flexen is such a mediocre option. Sarah, you saw Chris Flexen have one of his worst outings against the Cubs not all that long ago, and it basically led to him being designated for assignment by Seattle very shortly after that. I think that's a really, really nice call. I'm going to go with the Rangers at the Angels. And one of the reasons I'm going with the Rangers at the Angels is there's lots of reasons, but the Angels not being very good is an obvious point. It's also the fact that the Rangers offense wasn't very good. Now, they ended up scoring 3, which isn't abhorrent, but it's a little misleading. They put a couple of runs on late. The offense did not look great, and this is a massive game for the Rangers after giving up a game to the Mariners. They're still very much control their own destiny and very likely to win that AL West. But winning that division is huge, and you don't want to fall behind too much or only have a 2-game lead, knowing that they've got 4 games against Seattle to end the season, and a Mariner sweep there would take away that division, and you're likely looking at that 3rd wildcard spot or maybe even missing the postseason. Long story short, give me Mitch Garver, Nate Lowe, Josh Young, and Adolis Garcia. I like those guys because they give you some offensive upside, but also at decent prices as well. Worth pointing out that Corey Seager is day-to-day with an injury. Good chance that he's not in the lineup. So if you can get like an Ezekiel Duran or a Josh Smith or someone along those lines in the lineup, kind of makes sense to play as a cheaper option. But yeah, I will be stacking the Rangers for sure against a option in Griffin Canning that just can't be trusted in terms of daily fantasy sports or even redraft fantasy sports.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. Josh Young has been incredible this season. And one of the things that I was super impressed with him, he just came back from injury. You kind of never know what you're going to get when a guy comes back from injury this late in the season. And he didn't seem to miss a beat at all. He's just been like, oh, I'm back and I'm going to continue doing Josh Young things. He's been an awesome option for me in some redraft leagues. I love him as a daily fantasy option.
Absolutely. And then who is the second lineup that you're going to be stacking today, Sarah?
Yeah, so it's the Minnesota Twins. And what I like about this Twins lineup is there's a ton of cost-effective guys who have been sneaky good lately. But what I also like about this lineup is that they're facing the Oakland Athletics, who have just not been all that great this season. So we have a bunch of guys here who I think I actually recommended a couple of these guys last week, but I'm going to recommend them again because they're still mashing and they're still doing great things. Edward Julian and Matt Wallner have both been excellent over the last 2 weeks. Kyle Farmer and Willie Castro also offer some really cost-effective options there. But if you're talking about a guy, like every single one of the guys I just named have 2 home runs in the last couple of weeks, and they've just been on base a lot and scoring runs, which helps out with your daily fantasy stack. Wallner in particular is slashing 394, 512, 636 over the last 2 weeks. So definitely make sure you get him in your stacks because he's not that pricey.
Yeah, that's a great call. I'm going to really miss playing against the Athletics this year. Like it's going to be something.
I don't know. It might be the same next year.
Yeah, it's not. I just don't know. The Mariners went 12-1, and as people can tell from the jersey in the background, I am a big Seattle Mariner fan. That was very helpful in there. Still got a shot at the postseason here, half game back of the Houston Astros. And then in just fantasy, like the fact that you could take advantage of how poor they are in every regard. Like it's not just the pitching, it's not just the hitting. Like there is so much that you can just flat out take advantage of here. I'm going to miss it. Oakland Athletics. And it's what's crazy is they haven't locked up that first overall pick. Kansas City's been so terrible too that they've got a real shot to be the team. By the way, do you like the draft lottery?
I was just going to say the draft lottery makes it a little bit more interesting there. I do like the draft lottery a lot. I think that it disincentivizes true tanking. It gives you a cost to what if you only get the 7th pick with your tank, right? Yeah. So I do like the draft lottery, but the race to the bottom with some of these teams, you mentioned the Royals and the A's, the Colorado Rockies, man, have just been kind of a disaster this season. And the only reason we're not talking about it is because the Royals and A's exist.
Isn't that crazy? That is just the fact that the Rockies are not one of the 2 worst teams in baseball is just, there's been some really great teams this year. There's no question about it, but there are some really, really poor teams. By the way, I just simulated a MLB draft lottery simulator, and the White Sox end up with the 1st pick and the Athletics end up with the 6th pick. Baseball can be kind of tricky like that. Let's look at some starting pitchers to use today, Sarah. I'm going to go with Gerrit Cole. I think that the Blue Jays lineup, especially against right-handers, has been fairly mediocre. Gerrit Cole has been excellent. And the big thing here is I think this is a chance for Gerrit Cole to cement that he's the American League Cy Young. And I think that award, I don't have, I'm not in the Yankees dugouts and I'm not in the clubhouse very often. In fact, I've never been in the Yankees dugout or in the Yankees clubhouse. But I do think that the fact that Gerrit Cole has never won a Cy Young is going to be some motivation for him. It's going to be some motivation for the team. I like Gerrit Cole, and that's, this is not a contrarian play whatsoever. One of the most consistent starting pitchers in baseball over the last, half decade or so. But give me Gerrit Cole against Toronto. And also, if you want to help my Mariners out a little bit, Yankees, I don't hate that either.
I love the Gerrit Cole call. I think you're absolutely right that he's got a lot on the line here. And so even though the Yankees don't have a lot on the line, they're going to show up for Gerrit Cole. One of the things that's really interesting in the optimizer is that you can see for each player sort of a range of like what it predicts they might do in different scenarios as you're looking across the players on the bottom. And Gerrit Cole has both the highest ceiling here, but also the lowest floor, if that makes sense, or the highest floor, if that makes sense. And so it's like, I'm going to go with a different guy. I'm going to go with Pablo Lopez, but there are simulations where Pablo Lopez drops like 5 points, and they're just not simulations here where Gerrit Cole does that. And it's one of the things I really love about the tool.
What do you love about Lopez and his matchup? I mean, I think we talked about the A's, but that's got to have at least something to do with it, right?
Pablo Lopez is one of these guys this season it is a lot the A's, but it's also, he's one of these guys this season where when he has shoved, he has really shoved, right? And so it's one of these situations where, sometimes you're going to get 5 innings. He's going to give up 5 earned runs. He's only going to strike out 8. That's still a nice floor for your daily fantasy stack, but there's a chance. There's like a 10% chance he's going to do what he did on September 10th when he faced off against the Mets and he threw 8 innings, 0 earned runs, and struck out 14. And so I just really like what Pablo Lopez brings with potential. And I also, frankly, like the extra $1,000 that you can then play around with to hopefully add in another Dodger into your stack.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, is the fact that he isn't one of the more expensive options today. Now, you can use that extra 1,000 to justify putting a Gerrit Cole in the lineup. I think the fact that you can save a little bit of money in that regard is a really good point. I'm going to take a little bit of a risk, and I'm going to go with Andrew Abbott against the Guardians. And it's not based on how he's pitched as of late, because things have not gone very well for him in September, a 5.40 ERA. Things didn't go very well for him in August, a 6.08 ERA over those 5 starts. But I just think the Reds, this is such a borderline must win. The Reds may have to win out in order to make the postseason. If not win out, they need to get an awful lot of help from the teams that are playing ahead of them. But I do think Abbott is facing a team that can be beaten. The Guardians are not one of the elite offensive lineups. Guardians have already been eliminated from postseason contention as well. So you're going to see some options that are not the very best. This is what we see now, that you don't have as many of the hangover lineups, because as Sara and I have talked about, they just don't have those extra players that they used to. It's only 2 extra players, and compared to when it used to be anywhere up to 15. But he did strike out 7 over his last start in 4 1/3 innings against the Pirates. I think you'll get some strikeouts. I think because it is a must-win game, there may be rely on Abbott, although there will be, I will mention this too, if Abbott struggles, there's probably going to be a short leash, because the Reds just have to get every single win. But I'll take that chance on Abbott to give me some strikeouts, pair him as a cheaper option with Gerrit Cole, and I think you can have a pretty nice day.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome pairing. I've got a similar type of go with the primo guy and then also add a bargain option to it so that you can get the rest of your players in. And for me, that bargain guy is Sean Manea, who I was looking back over Sean Manea's game log, and admittedly, some of these are shorter starts because he's done the opener thing. He's done the bulk guy thing. The Giants do all sorts of stuff. He's getting the start today. Sean Manea has not given up more than 3 earned runs in any start since July 22nd.
Wow.
And I and some of these starts recently have been 5 2/3, 5 1/3. His last start was 7 innings against the Dodgers in LA, 0 earned runs. Now, admittedly, you're only getting 2 strikeouts with that. But I think the Giants have every incentive to let Sean Manea just have the ball and see what he can do at this point in the season. I don't think they're going to play around with games with him. Their playoff odds are I believe it was 1% the last time I checked. So I don't think the Giants are going to be have a quick hook for Sean Manea. And I like him as a cost-effective option to pair with a Pablo Lopez.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. By the way, the Giants have actually officially been eliminated
Okay. I
from
wasn't sure
playoff
about that.
contention. Happened late last night. No, that's okay. It's kind of crazy looking at these National League standings, by the way. Just the fact that there's going to be a team that wins about 83 or 84 games that ends up making the postseason, which is just kind of amazing. And it's awesome in terms of the fact that like teams like the Reds and teams like even the Padres, still have a little bit of hope going into that final weekend. But it's also like you talk about like incentivizing winning. Are we really incentivizing winnings when we have teams that are 78 and 80 and still alive for a playoff spot, Sarah?
I don't know that we are. I mean, I go back and forth on this. So part of me hates the extra wild card spot because it incentivizes slightly above mediocrity, which I think is something that the Chicago Cubs under Jed Hoyer have been excellent at. Like, we're just going to try to be slightly above 500, fill the stands, get to the dance, and like hope that our fans stick around. I mean, obviously the Cubs have exceeded expectations this year a little bit, but they're still, I think, sitting at like 83, 84 wins. That's their upper margin right now. And I don't know. That doesn't scream team built to win the World Series to me. I mean, I know we can all talk about the 2006 Cardinals and what they did, and it is possible. Like you're saying, they got a chance. And yes, the Phillies made it all the way to the World Series last year in a similar type of circumstance. But is it good that Phillies team beat the Braves and the Dodgers to get to the World Series? Would you rather see this juggernaut Braves team in the World Series than that Phillies team? And I think I'd rather see what the Braves can do.
Yeah, I lean towards you as well. And it's just the fact that you can go in and you can like not improve at the trade deadline. You cannot make big moves in the offseason and really get away with it more. And look, that's one of the reasons why, as a Mariner fan, I do hope that if the Mariners do miss the postseason, it's because Texas gets that postseason spot, because I want them rewarded for trying. I want them rewarded for going out and spending $500 million on that unbelievable middle infield combination. I don't want to see, look, all due respect to the Reds, all due respect to the Diamondbacks, I don't want to see teams that are taking advantage of the situation in the postseason. By the way, I am coming more and more around to just getting rid of division stuff. Just getting rid of division stuff, getting rid of league stuff, all that stuff. I think it should just be the best 12 teams in the postseason. Real quick, Sarah, before we get into the cheap options, just because I'm talking to a big Cub fan, would you rather play Philadelphia or would you rather play the Brewers in that first round series?
I'd absolutely rather that the Cubs play the Brewers. And it's because I know the Cubs and Brewers match up shockingly well. And it's like when the Cubs play the Cardinals, right? Like you have a little bit of that rivalry, like a lot about this team going on. Weird stuff happens, like Devin Williams will blow a save, or like Mike Tauchman will gun a runner down. Like it's one of those situations where everything kind of comes together and you can get a handful of wins almost magically, like that sort of like baseball magic that happens when you're playing your rival and things just extend. Watch Seiya Suzuki hit an inside the park home run off Josh Hader last year. Like that shouldn't happen, right? But it does when the Cubs play the Brewers. I think that a Cubs-Brewers matchup, while the pitching for the Brewers will be rested and ready to go, actually presents problems for that team, because the Cubs and Brewers are going to end the season against each other. So it means neither team has to travel, right? Like they'll both already be in Milwaukee, but they both will have already seen their bullpens like a ton. And I don't know what that does, but I think that it introduces enough chaos that it might mean that the Cubs can eke out a win over a team that is probably better than they are.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I just think also, too, the Phillies are a much better team. I think that Philadelphia is clearly the third best team in the National League behind Atlanta and the Dodgers. So, yeah, but it will be fun if they do end up matching up, just because, there is that built-in rivalry. And by the way, with Philadelphia and Milwaukee clinching yesterday, be on the lookout for some hangover lineups and maybe take a look at some of the streaming options and make dang sure before you put anyone in the lineup that they're actually in it, because hangover lineup is still real. It's just not as prevalent as it used to be when we had so many expanded rosters. So let's take a look at the Contrarian Edge Optimizer and look at some cheaper options. We'll say that the Optimizer really likes Dane Dunning, and that makes an awful lot of sense. He's been solid over his last few starts in the Los Angeles lineup. Not so great. Jock Peterson, I think, is an interesting contrarian play if he is in the lineup against Manea, just as a guy who is not going to be used very often and does have that chance to rip a home run. As expected, a lot of Dodgers here just because of the fact that they are going to be facing off against Flexen and the Padres, or excuse me, Flexen and the Rockies. Anybody who really stands out to you today, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's Mark Canha. We were just talking about the Brewers. If you are watching the Brewers lately, you know that Mark Canha has been hot. Yeah. He has been an excellent bat for them. He's batting cleanup for Milwaukee at the moment. So not quite as good as getting a leadoff guy, but he's only $3,600. He's been involved in so many big plays for the Brewers lately. And I think that Mark Canha is a guy that I'm probably going to try to stack. Honestly, I'm looking at that FTN data stack that you've got going there with the Pablo Lopez, Sean Manea, Alejandro Kirk, Mark. I might just roll that lineup and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. And I still can't believe that the Brewers were able to get Canha for so cheap. Such a solid player, and to get him for basically organizational depth. I'm talking about my Mariners a lot today, but that was one that I was very disappointed Seattle didn't look more into, because he's just a really solid player. He's also one of my favorite human beings in baseball as well. So that's also something to add up. As you see, too, there are a lot of Minnesota Twins that are being considered here. Willie Castro makes sense as a very cheap play. Michael A. Taylor, not exactly somebody you think about a lot in daily fantasy sports, but should be in the lineup. In fact, I believe he's hitting ninth against, or will be hitting ninth against the A's today. A lot to like there. I like this Baker blend that has a bunch of star options like Freeman and Betts, but also has guys like Taylor, Peralta, Jeremy Pena, who aren't going to break the bank and also help quite a bit. Dane Dunning? I wanted to ask you about that, Sarah. Is that somebody that you're looking at playing today?
You know, I am probably not going to play Dane Dunning today, but it's not because I don't like Dane Dunning as an option. I think that the games where the teams are like still in it and trying to like actually like win have a lot more variables going on than the games where maybe the teams are kind of locked up. And I know you were talking about like making sure players are in the lineup, those types of things. Absolutely double check that they're there. But I'm trying to limit the chaos in my life today. And I feel like that game has chaos written all over it.
Oh yeah, that's a good point too. That no doubt about that. Like, look, there's also something about like the fact that Texas has a bunch of guys who really haven't been here before. You know what I mean? Like there's not that usual, like Corey Seager certainly has been here before.
Simeon's been there before. Yeah.
Marcus Simeon's has a little bit of experience, but their pitching staff, especially with the injuries to Scherzer and Grom, just hasn't been there. So that'll be a very interesting one to watch. It should be a very fun Wednesday slate. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the Fantasy and Fire Ice podcast. You can follow me on whatever they're calling that website now at Crawford_MILB. Sarah can be found at BCB_Sarah with no H. Come on now. We know now this now. There is no H. Make sure you follow her. She's got great stuff to tell you. I have mediocre things to tell you, but follow me anyway. Really appreciate everyone tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow.